Being a fan used to mean you just enjoyed stuff, but in a world where every hobby has to be monetized, welcome to the rise of professional fandom. Hey y'all, SnarkyJay cosplay here. I'm making this video because as somebody who is a professional creator in fandom, I think it's really important sometimes to look at how we got into a world where being into Star Wars, Marvel, whatever, basically became a thing that you could monetize in a number of different ways, because I honestly never thought my life would go in this direction. And to a certain extent, I kind of hate that this is where we are now. Back in the day, fandom was all about pure participation. You watched because you wanted to, you'd cosplay for fun, you'd collect the merch just because you liked having it, and that was basically it. Now, a few years ago, as social media starts progressing and social media algorithms start deciding, maybe we should monetize people's accounts and throw them some cash for bringing people onto our platform, like YouTube, like Instagram, I think most people started to find that hustle culture made a lot more sense for them. Now, when I talk about hustle culture, I mean literally like that grind set thing where every single thing you do has to make money somehow. You like making earrings or beaded bracelets, go start an Etsy, sell some shit. Are you a really good artist? Start a Patreon, start selling subscriptions to your art. It's all about that. The onset of hustle culture into the mainstream basically made it where now people that were fandom artists, were fan fiction writers, were cosplayers, or people that liked just talking about movies, for instance, they basically figured out, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. So what I need to do is find a way to monetize this. And if I'm gonna monetize it, I gotta do it for real. I have to turn everything I love into a job. And for years, there's been gurus supposedly selling courses to teach you how to monetize the things that you love. And there's always been a certain element, I think especially in Western culture, telling people like, stop being f***ing stupid, stop being creative, go make money. And I think that social media, though, definitely made that worse, because a lot of us saw that culture and were still able to go, well, I'm an artist at heart, I'm gonna make the costume for the love of the art. But then platforms like YouTube and Instagram and Twitter later on start going, well, if you do this and it gets enough attention, I'll pay you for it, right? And the way that these things work, the way that YouTube works, for instance, is the more consistent you are on the platform, the more you are bringing people to watch, the more visitors YouTube gets. And so when you're consistent, they push you out. So if you can make money consistently, and the only way you're gonna make money is by being super consistent, then there is no YouTube is a hobby. There is no cosplay on Instagram is a hobby. There is no posting my thoughts on Twitter is a hobby. It becomes that much more tantalizing to just lean fully into, I need to be a content creator to make money. I'm not just creating content or cosplay or whatever because it's fun. I'm doing it because I need to make cash somehow. I had maybe 3 or 4 years of just engaging in fandom for fun. I mean, I started engaging with fandom in like 2011, 2012, but I started cosplaying in 2016, 2017, and there were a few years where I was just crafting for fun. I was just posting sometimes my thoughts on movies on my stories for fun. But then in 2021, when I started doing YouTube, the entire thing changed. Now, at that point, YouTube became a full-time job, and Instagram, the cosplay part of Instagram for me, basically became my side hustle. Both of these were things that I just liked doing for the love of the art, and they basically both became jobs to me. And honestly, when they became jobs, they became a lot less fun. And the weird thing that came about from this is that we ended up having a whole other subsection of fandom rise out of it. Because back in the day, you might have just been into Star Wars, Marvel, DC, but now you can be into those fandoms and also a fan of somebody who's talking about those things. So it's almost like a rise of an influencer fandom. Since fandom is kind of now an industry of its own, a lot of fans almost follow other fans more than they follow the actual IP. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about some of the discourse that's happened. Think about all of the discourse that happened with the last season of Andor and the one and only season of The Acolyte. There were literal Star Wars influencers shaping the discourse. People were blindly following the opinions of other people on the internet, even if they hadn't seen the series, just because the influencers in that fandom were that much more powerful than the IP itself. And you look at convention floors sometimes, you might have one or two people at a booth that sells t-shirts, and you might actually have a line of people waiting to meet a cosplayer. And I think part of the reason for this whole influencer fandom is that to a certain extent, a lot of the IPs that we've grown to know and love, they now don't get as much trust and adoration from the fandom, just because there's been a series of different decisions that have made a lot of different flops. And of course, a flop depends on who's watching it, right? But I think that as human beings, especially with the advent of social media and our ability to listen to other people who are willing to speak for us, I think there's way less emphasis on the IP itself and way more emphasis on the fandom and on the major voices within it. On the one hand, I think the whole influencer fandom culture is great to a certain extent because we do see a lot of authentic voices get to speak. And I think it's a great thing because sometimes, even myself, with movies that I don't end up reviewing, I could watch it and walk away thinking like, I don't really know how to feel about this. And I might go watch somebody like Jeremy Jahns, for instance, whose movie reviews I love, and when I see what he thinks, it kind of helps me work through my own opinions. I think that that is a really big part of what influencers and fandom voice leaders kind of do for people within the fandom. But on the other hand, we do end up with a lot of bad actors who are grifting either in a positive way or a negative way, but very few of their opinions are their own because they're basically just searching for clicks. And they'll do that by lying in their thumbnails about everything and anything. I mean, it happens constantly. And I think that that's definitely part of the negative parts of it because there are people that won't question it just because they're that into the voice they're listening to. And all of that, as I mentioned previously, ties into that hustle culture bleeding into fandom. For some reason, in the last 5 to 10 years, people just decided that nothing you do can be just for the love of it or the fun of it. Everything you do now has to make money. And I can understand the not wanting to waste time on nonsense, but I think as human beings, nonsense is relative. I love making costumes for me. There are things that I am planning on doing that I know nobody's gonna give a shit about. You think anybody on my Patreon, for instance, wants to see me as War from Darksiders? I know for sure that that is totally irrelevant, but I'm doing it for me, for the love of the art. But the problem is that I'm even aware that I'm saying, well, I'm gonna spend the time doing this, but I better have like 3 or 4 other costumes that people do want to see me in. I can't just do it for the love of the art. That's the world that we're living in. I hate it, and I hate to admit that I think that way. But it's the truth. If you craft, if you draw, if you stream, if you review, everybody expects that to be monetized somehow, either via Instagram, Patreon, Etsy, whatever. And as somebody who's wrapped up in it, like I just said, there's honestly mixed feelings about it because on the one hand, I think it's great to be able to monetize passion, but on the other hand, it actually becomes draining and kind of a killjoy because now there's a hamster wheel to spin on. And you have to keep spinning on that wheel to keep the engagement coming in, to keep the money coming in. And if you're not doing that, then it stops and there is no money, there is no engagement, and maybe things stop getting paid for because your passion dwindled. It really becomes this thing where hustle culture defines fandom and the people that are creating. You can consume it for fun, but think about all the ways that you spend money in fandom and all the ways that people in fandom are looking to make money. And that actually kind of makes an icky sort of hierarchy that I don't love. And it's funny because I talk about it with friends sometimes. I've sat there and discussed movies like Superman, for instance, with some of my friends, and I've given my opinion and I've heard them out. If I give my opinion, 9 times out of 10, that person is going to qualify their own with, but I'm not a professional. There is no professional way to have an opinion about a superhero movie. Just because I have a following or whatever, I don't think makes me any more qualified or makes my opinion any more important or better than anybody else's. But when we look at it from the outside, then you basically have a very real, very weird hierarchy where you have professional fans and casuals. And I think that regardless of who's getting paid, there should not be a hierarchy. Blur the line entirely, smear the ink. There's no such thing. Nobody should feel less than because somebody else is making money off their own opinions. But that sort of sentiment exists and it has permeated fandom culture. On one hand, it makes people feel uncomfortable with sharing their own opinions because they feel like somebody better has already done it. And on the other hand, I think it makes some people bitter about people with bigger opinions. It's just gotten gross. And so essentially, when you look at fandom, it basically, in the last few years, shifted away from being a community to being an industry. And when I think about it, I kind of have to ask myself, like, can fandom still belong to the fans if corporations and creators have basically monetized everything? There's always going to be creators and influencers who are going to jump on a bandwagon of a thing they don't really care about and put out opinions and content that mean nothing to them for the sake of making money and clout. That's not the way I run my shit. But hey, everybody's got the right to do what they want to do. However, in Hollywood terms, like even bad publicity is good publicity, I think starting conversations, making content, engaging with other people, even if it is on a monetized basis, I think still keeps fandom alive because it keeps people interested in it. It keeps people talking about it. I really don't think that fandom will ever go back to just being just for fun because at the end of the day, Pandora's box has been opened. There are ways for literally anybody and everybody to make money from their couch, either by posting on Twitter, by making a YouTube video, by building a costume and posting pictures of it, whatever. We've already figured out that there is money to be made, and unfortunately, money doesn't buy happiness, but it does, like, pay rent and buy food and gasoline, and that's, like, the bare minimum of what it does. So I don't think the entirety of fandom is gonna go, you know what? I'm going back to doing this for the love of the art. Unless a lot of people start winning lotteries where the monetization now means nothing, it's not gonna happen. And thinking about this topic drives me to one last point that I just wanna make real quick. I get a lot of people, smaller creators or people looking to get into the space that will ask me, well, how can I be a professional creator, cosplayer, YouTuber, whatever? And I think that unless your heart is really set on turning that hobby into a job, you should not be worried about making money with every single thing you do. Sometimes I regret doing that with what I do for a living just because the things that I really enjoyed doing no longer hold the same merit just because now they're actively tied to a revenue stream and they become work. I mean, they say do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, and I think it's better to do something fun that you enjoy like this as opposed to having a commute and going to an ad agency that I hated working at. But this became work. Like, it's not me goofing off and doing things. However, I spent a lot of time stressed and figuring things out and working on content strategies and writing and editing and photographing and building. All that shit that used to just get done for fun is now a job, and I am actively forcing myself to do it so that I can keep the job. I don't think that's for everybody. There are things that I do creatively that I still do just for fun. At one point I was trying to make illustrating a business and I decided I didn't want to anymore. So I still draw for fun. There's people that follow me that have no idea that I'm an illustrator and artist on the side because it's not a hustle. It's just something that I do for fun. And if that's you with a lot of things, you should not feel ashamed and you should not give into hustle culture telling you you have to make money. If you want to try it, go for it. But I think there's still definitely something to be said for fandom just being fun. And that's all from me. I've been SnarkyJay. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. For more SnarkyJay, be sure to check me out on Instagram. And if you'd like to support me, this channel, and my content creation, do check out and consider subscribing to my Patreon for exclusive photo shoot sets and cosplay content. I'll add links to all of those in the description below. And let me know your thoughts on the monetization of fandom in the comments below.